Welcome to my Twinmotion tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to import a model from Revit into Twinmotion, and from there, how you can make a good looking render. Now, to start off, I'm going to open my Revit project. Now that it is loaded, I'm going to show you where you can find Twinmotion. Now, it is part of the Epic Games app if you have that installed. You can find that under the Unreal Engine tab, and the Twinmotion section is right here. Now, you want to make sure you have the latest version of Twinmotion as well as the latest version of Revit in order for the linking process to work. I'm going to now launch Twinmotion and go back to Revit. While Twinmotion loads, I'd like to show you where you can find the tab to import. That would be under the View tab right here. And then if you see right next to the 3D view, you have a tab which is rightfully named Twinmotion. Now here is where you can find the syncing options. Now that we have Twinmotion loaded, we can open up a new scene using this button right here, and that will open up a default background. Now, I won't be using any of this for now, so I can just click on the scene graph, and then with the delete key, start deleting all of the different subsections right here. Now that I have my clean graph, I'm going to click on the Imports tab. Then I'm going to click on the plus sign. And finally, I'm going to click on Direct Link. Now you see right here, it says direct link setting sources, no source available. So I'm going to open up my Revit tab again. I'm going to click on the Twinmotion tab, and then I'm going to click on Auto Sync. Now, if we go back into Twinmotion, you can see that the direct link is synced to my Revit project. So if I click on Import, that should import all of my work that I already have in Revit. Now, in order to see the keys, I believe that you should automatically have a tab telling you which ones are the moving keys, how to change your scroll speed. And just to make long things short, to move, you use the A, W, and S keys. You move your camera by clicking the right button on your mouse. And to change the speed in which you are moving, you can use keys 1 through 6 in order to change the speed. Now that we have the movement covered, we can then go into applying materials. So if you see the materials in my Twinmotion model, they are currently the default textures from Revit. Now, we can use more detailed and higher quality textures from Twinmotion by accessing the Materials tab. And then let's say I want to change my brick texture. I can click on brick, and there is a multitude of different types of bricks to select. Now, let's say that I want to work with this specific type of brick. I already have it downloaded, but if you need to download a different texture, you can click on this arrow right here, and that should get it downloaded. So once you have this selected, you can just drag and drop into your material, and that should be able to change it. Now, one thing to notice is this option right here. What this button does is it changes if you want to replace a specific material or a specific object. So let's say I want to change this specific column, but I do not want to change the rest to a painted brick texture. If I just drag and drop into that brick, then it's going to replace all of them. However, if I click on this button again and then select Apply to Object and do the same thing, it's only going to change the individual object I selected and not the rest of the materials with the same texture. Now, if we look at the brick texture we already selected, the proportions are way off. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the object with the material. We're going to click on Materials. And now you can see this is the texture we have selected. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click on the UV tab. And I'm also going to click on either local space or world space. This is going to determine how the texture is being applied to the material. So for now, I'm going to click local space. And you can see this is still way too small. So by changing the scale, I can make the texture either larger or smaller depending on how I want it to look. Now that looks way better. And if you take a closer look at the materials, some of these textures are actually three-dimensional. So this is why I much rather use the Twinmotion textures rather than the Revit ones. So you can do this with multiple different materials. If we go back to the materials category, you can see that there's glass, brick, wood, concrete, and multiple other different textures. And it's all the same process, just change the UV. Sometimes if you're working with a concrete material, for example, you don't want to notice a pattern. So you can click on randomize UV, and that will change and randomize the directions and the spans in which the texture is applied. We don't want that to be the case with the brick, so I'm just going to deselect that again. Now, in order to add context, let's say this building is in the middle of plains for some strange reason, we can click on ambience and scroll down, and you can see that there's a bunch of different options for either time of day. You can do different seasons. Let's say you want it to be raining. You can change the slider right here. That will change the conditions. You can also make it snow by changing this slider right here. But that is mostly for weather. You can also change the time of day. But what we're trying to find is where we're going to add context. So we're going to go back to our library tab. We're going to click on vegetation. And then here we're going to click on landscapes. So there's two specific preset landscapes. There's flat and rocky grasslands. For the tutorial sake, I'm going to use flat. So you just click it and then drag it into your workspace right here. And that should bring it into view. Now you can see that it's maybe a little bit offset with the level. So you can use the gumball tool to either move it upwards or downwards as you need. But if we want our terrain to not be flat, what we can do is first deselect the snow to make everything clearer. So maybe get rid of that. There we go. And then we can select our topography by just clicking on it. And now we can sculpt the terrain by clicking on these tools. Now these are going to sculpt the terrain. We can change the diameter and the intensity in which we change it. And if we select this rise button, we can then hold and drag, and that will make our topography taller. If we need it to be lower, we can do the same thing. Let's say I just want a little bit of a rise in the background. So I'm going to select the rise button, maybe lower the diameter, lower the intensity, and then just drag and drop to gradually change the topography a little bit, maybe add a little bit of a rise to it. Now you can tell that the horizon is very clear and you don't have a lot of context in case you want to have a city or mountainscape in the background. So you can click back on the ambience tab, scroll down until you see the horizon button, and then from there you can enable it. Now that allows you to have a little bit of a background for the horizon, and there's multiple different types. So you have a city, you have mountains, you have the countryside, city island, European cities, whatever type of context you need, it's probably here. And you can also change the rotation if you move this bar around. So now that we have that set down, maybe let's say we want to have a couple of trees going on in this space right here. We can go back to vegetation. We can select trees. And then from here, we can select a multitude of different trees. Let's say I want some turkey oaks around. I can just drag and drop. And then from this bar, you can change the age of the tree to make it either bigger or smaller, depending on what you need. So I'm just going to place a couple of these down. And now that we have some foliage going on over here, what we might be missing for detail shots is some grass, right? Because this grass might not cut it for our renders. So what we might want to do is click back on vegetation, but then we want to click on the populate tab right down here. So once we click on the populate tab, we can then click on place, paint, and that's going to give us a paint palette. In this palette, we can then drag a lot of different materials in order to start painting them into the surface. So let's say I want to add this weed, I want to add tall grass, and just add a little bit of variation. What I can do is I can increase the diameter or decrease depending on how much surface I want to cover. And then much like the topography, you can just paint it, drag it around wherever you need it, and that will cover it, right? But let's say there's too much tall grass here and it's just not what I want to be happening. You can click on the tall grass, and then here you can see there's a density bar. So you can decrease that in order to make sure that you have the right amount of grass as you wish on the selected space, right? Let's say I want a little bit of long grass as well. I'm going to download that, and then I'm going to drag it into the paint palette, and that should make it look a little bit cleaner. Now you can see that there's still a little bit of open space on these sides, which I don't really love. So you could cover that with a context that your space might have, or you could also do the same with bushes where you can click on populate again, maybe select a variety of different bushes. So it all depends on what's present on your site, of course, but just for now, I'm going to use a couple. Let's say I'm going to use bush base. Oh, I deselected my palette. Okay, populate. I'm going to use bush base 2, bush base 1, and yeah, that should be good enough for now. And I'm just going to paint them around these corners right here to make it look a little bit more wild, right? So that hides the horizon a little bit and makes it look a little bit clearer. Now, we could tell that there's a little bit of grass missing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click escape to exit my paintbrush. Now I'm going to click on the grass that we added, and you can see it can reselect the paintbrush right here, and I can start painting again. So that should be able to make it a little bit clearer for whenever I render from this perspective. Now, something we could add is people, right? So we can click on library, then characters, and then from there we can either do groups or animated humans in case we're doing a video render. So I could just add maybe this group of people, they might be talking. I can select them, and then I can change the options for these people. So I can change what they're wearing, right? What they're doing, if they're idle, if they're walking, sitting, dancing. You know, there's a lot of different options in what you can do. So yeah, they might just be standing around here, you know, kind of talking to each other, right? But what if they want a place to sit? We can find these different objects from the library, objects tab, and then since it's an outdoor area, I'm going to go with cities. I'm going to click benches, and then from there, I'm going to select one of the many different benches that they have in the catalog. For now, I'm going to use the Lily bench. I'm going to drag, and then I'm going to drop it right there. So this might make it seem like this space right here is a little bit of a park area. So now that we have this context down, we might be wanting some clouds in the sky. So going back to that, we can click on ambience. We can scroll down to clouds. And then once again, we can scroll to see how many clouds we want. We can change the season in case we want some autumn going on in our workspace, right? We want a little bit of orange trees going on. And one of the things that will definitely take your render up in quality is going to be changing the lighting. So what you can do is you can click on your render tab, then change from standard illumination to lumen illumination. It might take a little bit to switch, but once you do that, the quality of lighting is just going to change dramatically. So if you take a look on the inside, of the building, you can see that the lighting from the outside is much clearer. It's much more accurate, and it looks like what you would find in a real building. For example, this view right here looks way better than if we use just standard illumination. You can tell it has reflections on the windows. One last thing that I would like to cover, which is path tracing rendering. So if you're going to take a photo, let's say we don't really care about seeing the people move and just care more so about the context, what you may do is you may click either this button right here or click the R key on your keyboard. And what that will do is that will create a ray traced render of your model. So you can tell this is a much more realistic looking render. I recommend this type of rendering for photos, not specifically videos, since that would take ages. And yeah, that should cover most of the modeling and rendering techniques. Now, for actually taking photos and exporting them, what you're going to do is you're going to click on the Media tab. You're going to click on this plus sign right here, and that is going to create an image. If you want to take a video, then you can click on this tab right here and then follow the instructions to create a video. But for now, we can just select our image. We can then change some properties. So let's say we want a different type of focal length. You can click on the camera, and then you can mess around with the slider in order to change the focal length and make it look like you're using a different type of camera for the pictures, right? So we could use a little bit of a closer perspective, just like so. And then from there, we can then look at the proportions of the image. So right now I'm going to be taking a 1920 by 1080 pixels photo. And then from there, I will just click on the render and then select the path tracer option. So click R on my keyboard. So you can see it takes a little bit longer, but it gets the job done. So once we have the photo all ready, like we like it to be, we can then click on export, select image, click on the image you just took, and then from there scroll down and export it. So I believe that should cover everything that is fundamental to know for Twinmotion. We covered adding material, we covered changing the topography, adding bushes, trees, grasses, people, furniture. And from there, it really all depends on how you apply the materials, how you apply the foliage, and then, of course, the angles in which you take the photos, the time in which you selected the sunlight to be in, the conditions, whether you have rain, snow. And from there, you should be able to take a pretty decent photograph of your model in a relatively realistic way. I hope this video was found helpful, and I will see you in the next tutorial video I make. I hope you have a nice day, and I will catch you later.